Now, we know that a significant number of the current cabinet went to Eton and the Deputy Prime Minister boarded at Westminster. And we do tend to associate being sent to boarding school with a privileged elite. But the numbers of children being sent away are rising. 73,000 of them were boarders last year. But the British Journal of Psychotherapy has published an article which suggests such children can suffer psychological damage akin to being taken into care. So does boarding school harm children? Well, Julie Lodrick is principal of the Mount School in York. Professor Joy Schaverien is the author of the article. Joy, what evidence do you have that boarding school is damaging?
I've worked for many years in psychotherapy with adults who attended boarding schools from a very young age. And I have noticed a cluster of common distresses and patterns of behaviour which affect the person's attitude to intimacy. This is known amongst some of my colleagues, particularly a colleague called Nick Duffel, who has written a book on this subject. But it's not, and it's generally known in couples psychotherapy. Quite often a man is referred by his wife because he's unable to talk about his emotions. So at its most extreme, the person is really unable to engage in intimate relationships and talk about feelings. And the younger a person is sent, the more profound the damage.
Julie, how conscious are you of this boarding school syndrome, an emotionally stunted adult who was sent away as a child?
I haven't come across the research before. I recognise that Joy is an expert in her field, so we as a sector value the work she's doing, indeed with any research into boarding. I think it has historical value, but the key point is that modern boarding is very different now to even 20 years ago. And I think that the key point is that the phrase sent away to school, we in boarding schools don't recognise that. It doesn't reflect the way in which modern boarding is approached by parents and children who choose a boarding education.
The children don't choose it, surely. Their parents choose it for them.
Children now, that's a key difference. Children are very much part of choosing their school along with their parents.
So, surely, Joy, if that is the case in a modern boarding school, that a girl or a boy is saying, yeah, I want to be at the chalet school, that sounds as if it's going to be fun, and there isn't the bullying or abuse that used to be there, we're talking about a different kind of atmosphere altogether.
I think to some degree that is true, and I have looked at Julie's school on the internet and thought it looked, if I was going to go to boarding school, that's somewhere I'd probably choose to go. It sounds like it's got a really kindly ethos. However, my point is that the younger a person is sent, the more profound the damage, and children do not have a choice in the way that... children may be asked what they want to do, they may be told this is an option, but a small child of 6, 7, 8 is quite unable to know what that means until the moment they're left on the doorstep. And I'd like to just give you a scenario. I would like you to imagine a child of 6, 7 or 8, a very small child. I mean, maybe you've got children or grandchildren of that age, and they're entering a huge institution in which parents clearly invest a great deal. And it's special because they've been told that this is special. And they're taken to this special place. It's all very exciting. They pack, get ready for it. And then they arrive at the institution, which seems huge. It's a vast institution. Some of them, some of my patients, and this is in the past, I hope it doesn't happen now, remember being left on the doorstep with all these people milling around and suddenly realising their parents, their siblings are going away. The wheels of the car are moving and they're being left there. And it's not until that moment, and I think, even today when things are explained better, the moment of loss is vast and often traumatic, especially for a small child, because the realisation only hits them once their parents have gone.
Julie, 6 is very, very young to be left by yourself.
It is young, and I think, again, and coming back to the point that there are very few boarders of that age, but it comes back to talk about what Joy was saying about being left. I think the process is very different now. So once a parents have chosen a school for their child, the transition is very different. So pupils will go and visit the school before they arrive. They will stay over. They'll have taster weekends. And also what we now recognise, it's important to support the parents in that transition as well. So connections and relationships are built with parents so that there isn't this sense of all of a sudden a child is taken to school and it's all unexpected.
How much, Joy, does it depend on the child? I mean, I can remember reading the Chalet School when I was a kid and thinking, wow, wouldn't it be fantastic to have midnight feasts and jolly japes and reading about, girls who said it was the making of them. Surely it's not bad for everybody.
I think that is possibly true. And again, it depends on the age, because I think at 13, a person is better able to make a decision, an informed decision. But the point about younger children, or actually older children as well, is for the first time in their lives, they find themselves in a situation where they're looked after by strangers and nobody loves them. They are not in an environment where they're loved. And at that moment, I think they lose words. They lose the ability to speak about their true feelings, because they're going to upset their parents if they say, I'm unhappy. They're going to upset the teachers. And even when they're treated in a very kindly way, as Julie sounds as if they really are well prepared in her school as best they can, they're in an institution where they are not loved. And for many, this constitutes a trauma. And it's a trauma that they cannot speak of because they cannot convey that to anyone, because they would be betraying their parents to say this.
Julie, that's true. You can't love the children in your school, can you?
You can't love them, but I've been a house mistress. I lived with 65 girls for 5 years. No, you're not their parent, but you do form very strong relationships with them. Again, it's different now. As a house mistress or anybody looking after children in a boarding house, the key difference is you are spending a huge amount of time with the children. You get to know them as individuals, and you do form very, very close bonds. And you're never trying to be
They're not going
going
to say to you, I hate it here, I'm unhappy, I'm being bullied, I want to get out, because they don't want to upset you and they don't want to upset their parents, do they?
But if you are with the children night and day, you get to know them. You know if something is not quite right with a child. And it's not just you. There are a huge amount of staff there. So all boarding schools have trained counsellors. The pastoral networks are really strong. You've got the academic teachers. You know the children in your care. You also are talking very regularly with the parents. You have a relationship with the parents too.
And Joy, not every child has a happy home life. What about the child whose parents are incredibly busy, perhaps they're abroad a lot of the time, and they actually get more love and attention at school?
Well, I think that may be true in some very few cases, but there are very few children who are sent thousands of miles away across the world to school who don't feel bereft, because they are in an environment where they've lost everything. They've lost their siblings, they've lost their home, they've lost their pets, their toys, their parents, they've lost everything that's familiar to them. And although they may recover and start to adapt, they are adapting, but they're hiding their true selves, their true feelings, because so much is invested in this. And because although there are counsellors and people who understand, they can't actually do very much to act on it. And the schools, and Julie's school may be a very good one, but a lot of schools are invested in keeping the children there because it's a business.
Julie, why do you think the numbers are going up?
Because modern boarding